Welcome. This is the Code True podcast. I'm Abby, your host today, and we've got Meeks with us today. Meeks is my cat. She's adorable. Hopefully you think so too. She's got a little mustache, so that's fun. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about being a charge nurse. I think this could be a really touchy topic for some people. I know a lot of nurses personally that don't they don't see how hard it is to be a charge nurse. And I think some of it is like the charge nurse themselves, the personalities. Sometimes people clash. Sometimes charge nurses who are in that position just maybe aren't a good fit. And that does happen sometimes. But I also wanted to kind of shed light on what it's like to be a charge nurse. So today we're going to talk about that. Some things that I want to acknowledge. There are some bad charge nurses out there. There are some charge nurses who should not be charge nurses, whether they're just not good at their nursing job, whether they're not good at multitasking, whether they're not good at handling the heat and the pressure, whether they are just not a good fit because they don't have the personality and like the people skills to do that. I do want to take some time and acknowledge, like I said, I know a lot of nurses who have had bad experiences with charge nurses. I have also had bad experiences with charge nurses. I've been grateful for a lot of the charge nurses that I've had have been really great, and that really impacted what I did when I was a charge nurse. Count how many times I say charge nurse in this podcast. Ew. Um, but I wanted to talk about that today, and I did want to hold space and acknowledge that, you know, this isn't me saying all of them are great and that all of them are wonderful and you need to buck up. That's absolutely not what I'm doing. So I do want to say, like, I recognize that there are bad nurses, that there are bad charge nurses, that there's people who should not be holding that position. I want to acknowledge that too. It sucks when that happens. It makes it so hard for the unit, and you can tell because everybody will walk in and just have that oh shit feeling, that oh shit moment. And I know what that's like to walk in and feel literal anxiety about who is running my department today and how I'm going to have to deal with communicating with them and how I'm going to have to interact with them. So I do hear it, I acknowledge it. Again, this is a safe space, but I did want to talk about it as somebody that recently just left a charge nurse position. Being a charge nurse is, I think, the hardest job I've had so far. Um, it was rough. There was a lot of things on the floor that people saw that made it, I think, easy to sit there and say, oh, I could have done that better. I could have done this. I could have done that. She's not doing a good job. This, and that. But I think there's also a lot of things off the floor that we don't see as nurses that our charge nurses do. And I did want to talk about that. I'm grateful for the experience, honestly. When I quit charge nursing and I went back to the floor, my life was so much easier. So it did give me that higher level of thinking, that prioritizing the, like, on a bigger scale, these are the tasks I need to get done. How do I prioritize? And like I said, I'm thankful for that. It is crazy, it is hard, and I don't think there's one right answer on how to do it. Everybody's going to do it a little bit differently. Everybody's going to prioritize a little bit differently. And I'm sure we've all seen that. I mean, we don't just have one charge nurse that we work with. We've got a couple, multiple, more than one. Some of us have been there for years and have seen many. So I just wanted to talk about my journey with that today. Hi. She wants snuggles. So, I started off as a charge nurse in 2022, maybe early 23. So I did it for almost 2 years. A full year of that was officially a charge nurse position. I, like I said in my intro episode, I had a really good director and manager that were really helpful with my journey. And we had a couple charge nurses quit. I approached them and I said, "Hey, I think this is something I want to do." Um, and I interviewed, I got the position. I was really excited. I felt really proud. I was only a year and a half in to my nursing career at that point. And I felt really proud of myself. I felt like I had done a lot of work. I had really come forward in my skills. I'd learned a lot, and I was getting to the point where I was ready to be taking the next step in my career. And like I said, I approached my bosses. I got the job. And that is my favorite part about this was one of my really good friends was a charge nurse too at the same hospital at the time. And she kept saying it was a trick. It's a trick. Don't do it. And honestly, it was. It was. It really was a trick. There was so much that wasn't included. And I don't think that was on purpose. Like I said, I had a really good manager, a really good director, and I think I came into it in a time where we started having some growth in my hospital. We had gotten a new CEO. There was just so much stuff that was changing. So when I first started my journey, I was a big go-getter. I was very into like, what does the department, what does the team need? And that has been, I think, a big priority on the entire time I've held that position. Um, my biggest thing was I'm here for the unit, I'm here for my nurses, and that was really where my focus was, and that was what I held on to this whole time. There's been times where I drank a little bit of the Kool-Aid and I really kind of lost where my priorities were, and it was um, a bit difficult to come back and see that I had lost myself so much in this position and how much I was doing that wasn't appreciated because I was focusing on what I felt was necessary and not what higher ups thought was necessary. So, starting my journey, I really focused, like I said, a lot on my nurses and on my unit. I tried to go above and beyond. I would try to do my best not to overload anybody, and I tried my best to still take some of the weight off of everybody else. So a lot of times as charging, I was still taking patients. I would still try and lunch everybody. I was running the desk. There was like a good 6 months where we didn't have a solid secretary, or if we did, a lot of times I had to use them to sit on psych patients or to be at the front desk as a greeter, or honestly, some days we just needed them more as a floor tech, and that was gonna help out my unit more than me having a secretary. So for the first like 6 months, there were too many days to count where I was charge nursing. I was trying to get everybody lunches, and I really did push that for the first 6 months. And there were also a lot of days where I didn't have a secretary. So I really did feel more stuck to the desk, which was fine at the time. It was a lot different at the time. So it was fine. I felt like I was able to function. A lot of the other charge nurses kept telling me that I was doing too much. I needed to focus on myself, that some of the other people were being lazy and that I needed to just make them do their work. And I didn't feel like that was the case most of the time. I did feel like there was like literally one or two people that was the case, but like 9 times out of 10, that was not it. So I really did keep prioritizing what I felt was most important, which was the safety of my staff, the unit, making sure that things were going smoothly, and trying really hard not to put anybody in an unsafe situation. So, a little bit later in my charge nurse career, probably like a year and a half in, a year to a year and a half in, I had a more consistent secretary. It's actually Barabon. It's actually Barabon, who I'm hoping to eventually get on some episodes. Um, she was so great. She was really a big turning point for me because she was extremely competent. She was extremely confident. She was trained very well by somebody who honestly could have run the hospital on her own. So I had a lot of confidence in Barabon, which allowed me to do kind of like shift more into being on the floor. I felt comfortable to leave the desk with Barabon. I was there if she had any questions or if I needed to pick up a phone call or if I needed anything, but I felt really confident that Barabon was fully capable of running the desk. Um, so that was a big turning point for me. At that point, I started focusing more on how can I continue pulling load off of my nurses. So there was a couple charge nurses that would give like 5 rooms, or they would do like 4 rooms in a psych patient. And instead of doing that, I started just taking all of the psych patients, unless it was like a really unsafe number. The most I've ever taken, I think, was 8. And that's because we were in the ER. It was mostly going to be like morning meds, vitals, and any emergency medication administrations or seclusion or restraints. Those were the things that I had to deal with my patients. And on good days, it was we're done by 10 a.m. Everybody's got their meds, everybody's got their vitals. On hard days, I did have to ask for help sometimes, like, hey, can you help me get this blood sugar? Hey, guys, we've got to medicate a patient or put them in seclusion or restraint. Like, can I get some hands on that? So there were some days that definitely made it more difficult to do that, but most days I feel like went pretty well, and I took pride in being able to take that off of my nurses, but also being able to give that to the psych patients instead of them being like the last thing that my nurses were thinking about because they had 4 sick patients or like maybe an ICU admit and 3 ER beds that were turning. Anybody that's been there knows that is rough. That's hard. Anybody that's been there knows that that's rough, trying to have a behavioral health patient and be like, oh my gosh, I have to give this antidepressant at 9, but everything is literally crashing. And I've got 3 med surg admits that also need their meds at 9, and there's 10 of them for each patient. And also it's insulin, it's gabapentin, it's all of these, more important, if you will, medications in the ER, especially like people that are sick and getting admitted, stuff like that. So, one of the things that I started doing, like I said, was taking the psych patients, and I felt really good about that because I felt like, hey, that took more off of my nurses that they don't have to do because I can do that. I can do vitals. I'm still a nurse at the end of the day. I can do vitals. I can give meds. I am fully capable of contacting security and getting a patient in seclusion. Those were things that I could do. I also did my best as much as I could to give lunches. We didn't have a nurse that was staffed to lunch. And honestly, even some days a float nurse wasn't even enough just because we were so busy and so crazy. So for a long time, I really did try to do that. And I kept getting comments like, Abby, you can't do everything. They're asking too much. You need to stop giving in. And at the time, I didn't feel like it was too much because I was doing what was best for people. So at the time, you know, I felt good about taking the psych patients. I felt good about giving everybody lunches. I felt good about having a secretary and being able to leave the desk and help with the septic workup or help with an intubation and like feel confident in doing all that alongside charge. To me, that was what being a charge nurse was being an extra resource, being able to take a load off of people, being able to, hey, if you have this really sick patient and I need to watch your 3 patients for a couple hours while you're stabilizing this very sick ICU patient, I can do that. That was what my image of a charge nurse was, and honestly still is to this day. Um, for me, things started changing when they started pushing metrics more, and it started with um, the our hospital honestly just started growing. We had new needs. We had changes. I was part of a team that presented a PowerPoint to our CEO and administration people about trying to get psychiatric services and like a psychiatrist or a board certified psychiatric nurse practitioner, and trying to get a boarding unit somewhere safe for the psych patients where they weren't sitting in a hallway or like having to be in one room and having to like get permission to walk to the bathroom or get permission to shower. Um, I was part of a team that did that, and I'm really thankful we did. That was part of my journey in becoming a psychiatric nurse practitioner. Um, but with that, also, I feel like we were just in such a phase of changing and adapting to what we needed that they saw opportunity for more growth in a way that I wasn't expecting. And that's partially what led me, I think, to stop being a charge nurse. A year and a half ago, we started prioritizing metrics. And I really think that's something we've always done. I think that's something that was always there, but it started getting trickled down more to us. Like instead of it being an admin metrics or like a manager metrics or a director metrics, it started being pushed onto the charge nurses as well. And it started out really small to where it didn't conflict with my time management or what I was prioritizing. And it's slowly over the last couple years grown to the point where I felt like I was starting to betray my values. And that's ultimately what caused me to stop. We started doing these things called patient rounding. If you're a charge nurse, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But we started prioritizing patient rounding. And like I said, it started out really small. It started out where it would be like 5 a day, and you would just have to go into a patient's room, ask them like 10 questions, and it really wasn't that bad. I didn't like the questions because they felt very like babysitter-ish. Like they originally started out with like true or false, my doctor cared for me as a person. My nurse paid attention to my needs. Like I said, it felt very babysitter-ish. I didn't like that because I felt like the questions kind of set us up for the patient to be like, well, now that I think about it, and I understand why they wanted us to do them. I just feel like they could have been better and they could have been handled so much differently. But it started out with stuff like that, and it was 5 a day, and then slowly it was, a couple months later it was 10, and then it was 15, and then it was, oh, we have to do them because your director and your manager aren't doing any. And that's a whole different ballgame because, like I said, I was close with my director and my manager. I still am. But like the amount of stuff that they had to do, yeah, of course they're not going to come and spend an hour and a half like doing 20 patient rounds or 30 or 50 or, because that's that's an unrealistic thing to ask. They could come do a couple, I agree, but to come and do as many as they were asking, I think was a little bit unfair. And so it kept pushing down to us, and they kept saying it wasn't enough at like a rate even higher than my hospital. It was like regional. That's not the correct term, but I don't want to give away where I work. But at like a regional level, they were saying we weren't doing enough. So eventually, probably like 9 months ago, they pushed it up to 30% of the patients that came in for the entire day. And there were days that was crazy because we saw like 120 people. And that's a crazy amount of time to go in and spend 10 minutes with 20% of 130 people, and then for night shift to do 10% of 130 people. You know, that's kind of crazy. Um, and that took away my time with my patients that I was taking care of. That took away time with um, my nurses that I was able to help. And it started getting to the point where I was pulling longer shifts because I would save them till the end and put them in. I still did them up until a certain point, and it started getting more and more prioritized. Administrators would come down at like 9 a.m. to do their morning rounds with us and say, like, how many have you done? And I would say, oh, I've been in like 10 patient rooms, but I haven't put any in. And they would say, oh, well, can you put them in? And like, it would be like just crazy. We would be like coding somebody at 7:30 in the morning, or we would have like 10 holds down in the ER. And I was trying to manage that, or like I was trying to help nurses with stuff, and it was really frustrating to have somebody come down that I felt like knew nothing about my department and what we actually needed, to come down at 9 in the morning and say, oh, why haven't you put in any orbits, or why aren't we prioritizing that? And those are conversations that I have actually had with higher ups, and the things that I've had to professionally say to say, well, I've got all the psych patients and I had a nurse call out, so I am taking this assignment until 10 a.m. And, I'm still trying to help everybody else, and I'm trying to run the desk, even though I've got a secretary that's fully competent. But even on hard days, like, they still need help. Um, and just having conversations like that more than once about why I wasn't prioritizing a click sheet question about how my patient felt about their care, when I was actually prioritizing the physical care. Um, there were times that I had 10 patients. That would be like 5 psych patients and 5 real patients, or like 3 med-surg holds and 6 psych patients, stuff like that. So having conversations like that over and over, when I would sit there and literally, it felt like, beg them to see that I was actually doing physical work for the patient, giving meds, starting IVs, drawing blood so that lab didn't have to come stick the patient again, communicating with doctors, all the stuff that goes into, putting people on the bedpan, cleaning up patients that are in briefs, doing real patient care, and still trying to run my unit, still trying to help with septic workups, still trying to, having to run a code. That's me. And having conversations multiple times about why my patient rounds weren't done, about, why people's whiteboards weren't filled out, about why I hadn't been up to triage to see if we were direct bedding. Stuff like that was so hard to have conversations multiple times. Um, when I was actually physically there, supporting everybody the best I could. So that was something that started really, really weighing on me. I started getting really frustrated. Um, I stopped prioritizing my patient rounds because I realized that at the end of the day, everything was just a number to them, and that was all they were looking for. They weren't looking for how much physical work and labor I did. They weren't looking for how well my nurses did. They weren't looking for how much of an impact we were making, how, like, they were just looking for numbers at the end of the day. And something that I learned that I want to share with you guys about those numbers and why they're so important to administrators and stakeholders is it counts for reimbursement. Um, Patient satisfaction scores, if you get like a 5 stars out of 5, the higher your percentage of 5 stars, the higher the hospital's reimbursement rate is. And unfortunately, like, 4s don't count, even though that's an 80%, that's a passing grade, that's oh, like I asked my nurse for water and she didn't bring it to me because she forgot, you know? It's stuff like that. And then um, we started having meetings about these numbers and meetings on how to get our scores better. And the stuff that they would say was really disheartening. They wanted us to start prioritizing patients that we thought we could get 5 stars from. And I don't mean like medical negligence. I don't mean like, oh, this person looks like they're going to give us 5 stars, they get a bed first. That's absolutely not what I mean by that. What I mean is they started saying, check in on your patients more if you feel like they'll give you 5 stars. Sit and talk with them longer, offer them, water and food, like give them more hospitality. And then the patients that we weren't going to get 5 stars, like, or even honestly a good rating, like you just know from the get go sometimes who those patients are going to be, um, which is very stereotypical, but I think there is some truth in that. They like started telling us, well, you don't need to focus on those patients as much. And again, they weren't telling us not to like give meds on time. They weren't telling us to ignore blood work, nothing like that. No medical negligence, but they started saying things like, we need to prioritize like hospitality and like true caring care on these patients that were going to give us higher ratings because of this reimbursement. And that was just one of those peek behind the curtain moments that really impacted the way that I saw what we were doing. And that was another thing that really made me put my feet in the dirt more and dig my heels, because what do you mean? What do you mean? It was such a crazy concept for me to hear people that were running our hospital deciding things, saying, these are the people that make policies for us. These are the people that, sorry, I burped. These are the people that make policies for us. These are the people that can, like, yay or nay things that we want. These are the people that can advance things that we're asking for to higher levels. And these are the people that are saying, if you feel like you're not going to get 5 stars, like, you don't have to focus on this patient as much. And wow, that really hit me wrong. It felt evil because, I mean, somebody that comes in pain, and I have medically treated them with pain meds as much as I safely can, and they're still in pain, and they don't understand that it's a work in progress, or that I've given them the max amount of medications I can safely give them, or that my goal is to, minimize the pain, but I probably won't be able to take it all the way away. And I know that person's not going to give me 5 stars, because realistically, that's not what their impression is, and that's their right to not have that impression. But for us to be getting this concept from people higher up running the hospital that, hey, you don't have to prioritize them as much because they're not going to give you 5 stars, was absolutely insane to me. It was a real peek behind the curtain moment. It was a real holy shit, don't drink the Kool-Aid moment. That really changed my opinion on what I was doing as a charge nurse, and honestly, like, really helped me dig even more into my beliefs of, like, I'm here to help people as safely as I can while keeping my license safe and my nurse's license safe and all of the patients in the unit safe, and all the staff in the unit safe too. So after that, I really started, like I said, digging my heels in. Like, I kind of said, fuck it to these patient rounds. Like, I still put them in so that my managers didn't get in trouble, but I stopped going above and beyond. I stopped going in and actually asking the questions. I started going in and saying, like, hey, my name's Abby. I'm the charge nurse today. I just wanted to come in and round on you real quick and see how you were doing. Do you need anything? Do we know where we're at in our care plan? Stuff like that. I stopped asking all the individual questions. I stopped following the lineup. I stopped doing what was actually laid out for me in this question bank because they didn't care about us. They didn't care about what my patients wanted or needed. So I stopped caring about what they wanted. So that was a real turning point for me. And I initially started with a really good reputation as a charge nurse. I had a really good reputation with admin and my managers and my nurses. I had a really good reputation with almost everybody that I came into contact to. And this was kind of the point where I stopped being, I don't want to say I stopped being on good terms with admin. I'm still on good terms with some of them. And I'm happy with that. I'm also not on good terms with some of the other admin, and I'm perfectly fine with that because I learned the hard way that they are not aligning with my values. And I also think that some of the stuff that they're pushing is wrong. Um, I've like come to a decision that I've started figuring out who the bad guy is in this. And I know that it goes even higher than my admin. I don't necessarily think that the people that I am on bad terms with are bad people, because that's not true. They definitely aren't. They are just, they drink the Kool-Aid. They just, they don't see why what I do is important to me, and they don't understand why what they're asking is selfish, and greedy and corrupt, and that doesn't make them bad people. I've had really good conversations with some of them that have been really great, so I know they're not bad people, but the Kool-Aid is strong. And for those who enjoy drinking it, there's a reason they enjoy drinking it, and I think it's because they don't see what we see. So all of that to say, I think a lot of people can be quick to judge a charge nurse based on how they handle things. I know that there's charge nurses that I've been like, absolutely not. This person is awful. But having like the bigger picture, seeing behind the curtain, sipping the Kool-Aid a little bit, I do now see, like, in hindsight, like, maybe I just didn't understand. So I just wanted to make this episode to kind of tell you guys about some stuff that really alters how your charge nurse thinks and focuses on things. I don't necessarily think it makes them a bad charge nurse or a bad guy. Everybody's different. Everybody does things differently based on how they see fit, and also I think based on like their desire to be liked by admin, or their desire to keep charging, or their perception of what's important, and why they want to run the unit the way they do. But I just wanted to share all that because it is hard being a charge nurse. It is literally the hardest job I've ever had. It's the most frustrating job I've ever had. Um, and it's also been the most rewarding to see like how appreciated I am by my nurses, and the people that do know how much I do, like my manager and my director. It does feel good to be like, wow, I've done all of these extra things that I didn't have to do. I didn't do some of the things that I was supposed to do, but I kept everybody safe. All the nurses are happy. Everybody got lunch. And at the end of the day, like, that's what's important. I don't find metrics important. I know why we have them. I know that it's important to please the stakeholders. I know that it's important to please the government to get reimbursement and to play the insurance game. That'll be a whole nother episode, honestly. But I just wanted to shed some light, in case you're struggling with a charge nurse, or in case you feel like you maybe want to do it. I'm not saying don't do it. I think there are some rewards. I know so much more about like the politics of being in a hospital, and not to say that I know all of them or even a lot of them, but I do have that higher understanding of it. So I just wanted to make this to share with you guys. If there's a charge nurse you just really don't like, there might be some reasons why they are the way they are. It's not to say they're a bad person. It's not to say they're a bad charge nurse. It might just be the way that they're interpreting their goals and what they're being told to do and how they're supposed to be handling things. Maybe they are a bad charge nurse. Maybe they are a bad person. I don't know. That's for you to judge and tell. But thank you for coming to this episode and hearing me talk. This one was a tough one to make. It's something that I've really struggled with for the last year, probably. It's something I've been like internally struggling with because of my values and my beliefs, but it's also something I've been struggling with just because of my anxiety and like my desire to please and like be perfect and like have everything go as planned. And it doesn't happen that way. I know it doesn't, but thank you guys for listening to me share about my experience, and I hope you have a good day. And I hope you leave here with maybe a little bit of a different perspective on charge nurses and what it's like, because it's not easy and we don't like it either sometimes. Okay, bye guys.